Well, that's a good question. I'm still figuring that out. 42. My name is Eric McLaughlin. I'm the Assistant Dean of Student Affairs for Graduate and Health Professions here at UPike.
Wow. That's a cool title.
It's a mouthful, that's for sure.
I suspect when Eric was a kid that you didn't say, this is what I'm going to do with my life.
I wanted to be an architect. I loved to draw when I was young, and then I also wanted to be a farmer like my grandfather. So that really didn't materialize, and then I don't know that I really had a lot of goals in high school, so this is all relatively recent. Well, not relatively recent, this is all sort of happened as an adult like a lot of people.
Now, obviously, so as a kid, things didn't come out like as an adult like you thought as a kid you was hoped for. Is there a dream job for you, or what that might be?
You know, I'm just kind of open to what comes now. I guess a dream job for me would be very similar to what I'm doing. I get to work with students. I get to feel like I make a positive impact every day. I work with some really great people. Somewhere along my path, I figured I would have some role in academia, some role in higher ed, and possibly even some role in the church. And so, I'm kind of getting there. Not 100% sure where it lands, but that's the beauty of life, right? If you're open to what comes down the pike, then you're pleasantly surprised sometimes. Because every experience kind of has shaped another experience for me. So I wouldn't be as good in this role had I not sort of taken a step out of higher ed into staff development a few years ago. And so that really broadened my experience. So I think every experience sort of leads to another one and sort of prepares you for those future experiences.
In these experiences, was there one experience that really spurred you on to the path that you're on now?
Oh my gosh, yes. I was setting, I don't know how old I was. It was 1997 or 8. I was probably 20 or 21, maybe 22. And I was sitting in anthropology class at a little tiny liberal arts institution in southeastern Ohio. And I had a husband and wife team. So I was sitting there, and for the first time in my life, I realized how big and beautiful and old and fascinating the world was. And so that was sort of one of those pivotal moments in life. You're like, wow, mind blown. So that was a sort of a defining point in my life. And then the other defining point was when I got to go back and work for that institution for a while, and really just sort of framed up who I was as a professional and who I am as an administrator, as an educator. So those were some pretty moving experiences early on in my educational experience.
So your call, if we were to try to take all these years of experience and boil it down to a sentence, Eric is called to...
Eric is called to make a difference like every other human being that God puts on the planet. We're called to love each other. We're called to pursue justice. It's like the verse from Micah, right? Or is it Malachi? Malachi?
No, Micah.
Or Micah, okay. A little rusty on the M's in the Old Testament, but we're called to that, and every person that arrives on this planet does have some unique characteristics, and I think we spend a lot of our time defining those and refining those and understanding what they are.
Would you say that your current job or career right now aligns with this greater call that you have?
Most days. I mean, there's certainly aspects of what I do when I have students sitting here and we're really talking about solutions that are going to make a big difference for them. Yeah, right on. And I can draw the links. Nobody likes to do a lot of tedium, but at the same time, there's a place for that, doing your work thoroughly and well. So not every aspect of every job or every career field is going to be a party every day. There's going to be grunt work. There's going to be things that you don't like, but you can pretty much make most roles a place where you can shine if you think about it.
So you've dealt with a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people have dealt with you. Has there been a very influential person, or maybe people that have guided you, helped you, been most influential when it comes to who you are today?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I could just start at the top of the list and go down. I mean, my family, definitely a defining influence. My grandparents, my parents, my wife now, I mean, friends growing up, and of course, teachers. There are some teachers that just really made a huge impact. We had some ministers that have really just made a huge impact in my life. And I think about former places I've worked. I think about former bosses, and there's one that just really, there's a couple that really just stand out as outstanding. And so they're inspirational, right? The way they live their life and the values by which they operate consistently day in and day out. And I still look to those people as role models. In some cases, 17 years after, still remain close with those people, and that sort of really shaped kind of who I am and how I am.
Would you tell us about one person particularly, maybe who had a huge influence on you?
My aunt who lives in New York, she was raised in the same area of Ohio I was, and she left, probably 50, 60 years ago. I mean, and she went to college, and she went forward and got a master's degree, and then she went back and got her doctoral degree. And she ended up running a school system in upstate New York, and has been very plugged into her community. And, she always was sort of larger than life. And even to this day, when she walks into the room, I straighten up my back a little bit and make sure that my elbows aren't on the table. And so the passion and the zest that she had for life, and how she kind of threw herself into education, it made a big impact. It was impressive, and still is. Like, she's a force to be reckoned with. So even at 42, I still have sort of a holy reverence for this woman. I'm not about to cross her either, but nonetheless. And then one of my grandmothers, who's from this area, and just her consistency and work ethic, the way that she cared about other people, even those who mistreated her, just really defining. And the same thing for my father. So just watching him go to work, and the ethic that he displayed, his faith and his perseverance and dedication to his family, those really kind of are the three people I would say that have shaped me the most.
So to get where you are today, what would you say you did to position yourself for this?
I was fortunate. I've always had a lot of people who have believed in me. I've had a lot of folks that are like, hey, you've got some potential. And some of it is just being the kind of person that reaches out and is interested in what's going on around them. For me, I never go to work and think, I'm only going to occupy this little corner of the organization. Like, this is great. This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. Some of it I love, some of it not so much. But I'm going to get out and I'm going to engage with the broader campus. I'm going to engage with the people around me. And I think that has helped me get to where I am, because I'm interested. I'm interested in what you're doing in spiritual life. I'm interested in what's going on over in academics and undergraduate. I'm interested in, where our students get placed in their career fields. And I think that that's just part of it. You've got to be a champion for the organization you go to.
Now, in your years, I'm sure you've had some challenges or obstacles, right? It seems like no one gets to where they're at without some bumps and bruises. How'd you navigate those challenges and obstacles?
Prayerfully. God does listen, and he shows up in interesting ways. And so definitely prayer and the support of my family. Everybody has obstacles. There's always something there's always the next mountain, right? You get to the top and you're like, man, I'm up here, this is great. And then there's another one. And so I think just sort of trying to take things in stride. And I historically have been a fairly type A person where I want to just kind of get in there and control the situation. But you can't always do that. We do depend on God. We depend on each other. We don't get to where we are by ourselves. We don't exist in a bubble. So, whether it's distance, whether it's some sort of circumstance that's not ideal, whether it's struggling for money, whether it's, injury or health challenges, we all have some sort of obstacle. And it's hard to stay positive sometimes, and you really need those people to sort of lean on and fall back on, and faith in God, faith in the greater good of what you're here to do. That just becomes essential part of motivating you, because you're going to need to rely on that on some days.
Mm-hmm. And so on those days, right, when you really have to rely on the Lord in a special way, probably sometimes has to do with students who come into your office and ask you big existential questions. And when you have a student who comes in and says, Eric, I just have no idea what I'm supposed to do with my life, what kind of advice do you give them?
I listen, and I want to hear the whole story, and I usually try to dig just a little bit to see how they got to this conclusion, because there's usually something that has prompted it, whether it's a breakup with one of their significant others, or whether it's some kind of family issue, whether there's some financial pressures somewhere. There's usually some underlying reason why a student would get to doctoral level preparation and just sort of have an about face, or some sort of a crisis. However, there are those days when you explore with a student kind of what's gone wrong and where they feel like they tripped up, and you start sort of peeling the onion, to borrow a psychological term. And there are those days when I choke up and cry. Usually behind closed doors, because I'm a big, strapping man. We're not supposed to cry in public, but some situations are just heartbreaking, and you pray for the student, and you just keep trying to help them make the right decision, and the best possible decision, because you always want the best possible outcome.